The boy was screaming when she found him. Gianna heard it from a distance, raw, animal sounds that cut through the stillness of the prairie like a blade. She'd been tracking a wounded antelope for most of the morning, following the blood trail through the tall grass when the sound reached her. She stopped, her hand tightening on her bow. Screaming meant people, and people in this part of the territory meant danger. The Comanche had been pushed farther west with each passing year, their hunting grounds shrinking, their numbers dwindling. The white settlers came in waves, claiming land that had been walked by her ancestors for generations. And with them came soldiers, bounty hunters, and men who saw her people as nothing more than obstacles to be removed. Gianna had learned to be invisible, to move like smoke through the grasslands, to hunt alone, to avoid the settlements and the roads where death waited with rifles and rope. But the screaming didn't stop. It grew louder, more desperate, and despite every instinct telling her to turn back, Ayana found herself moving toward it. She crested a low rise and looked down into a shallow valley. What she saw made her stomach turn. A fence stood in the middle of nowhere, a crude thing made of rough-cut posts and barbed wire stretching across the prairie like a scar. And tied to one of the posts, his wrists bound above his head, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 12 or 13. His shirt was torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood, and his bare feet barely touched the ground. He'd been left there, exposed to the sun, the wind, the predators that roamed these grasslands after dark. Gianna scanned the area. No horses, no wagon tracks leading away. Whoever had tied him here had done it on foot or had taken their mounts with them. The boy's screaming had dissolved into ragged sobs now, his head hanging forward, his body sagging against the ropes. Gianna stayed low, watching. This could be a trap. White men sometimes used bait, a wounded animal, a stranded traveler, to lure Comanche close enough to shoot. But as the minutes passed and nothing moved except the grass in the wind, Ayana made her decision. She rose and walked down into the valley, her bow held ready, her eyes scanning the horizon with every step. The boy heard her approach, his head snapped up, his eyes wild with fear. "No," he gasped. "No, please don't." He stopped when he saw her. Gianna stood 5 feet away, studying him. He was young, pale beneath the dirt and sunburn, with light brown hair that hung in his eyes. His wrists were raw and bleeding where the rope had cut into them, and his lips were cracked from thirst. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They weren't the eyes of someone broken, they were angry, defiant. "Who did this?" Gianna asked in English. She'd learned the language from traders and missionaries, though she rarely spoke it. The boy stared at her, his chest heaving. You speak English." "Who did this?" she repeated. His jaw tightened. "My uncle and his friends. They said I was worthless, said I ate too much and worked too little, so his voice cracked, "they left me here." Gianna's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in her chest. She stepped closer and pulled a knife from her belt. The boy flinched, but she ignored it, reaching up to cut the ropes binding his wrists. He collapsed the moment he was free, his legs buckling. Gianna caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him carefully onto the grass. "Water," he rasped. She pulled a water skin from her pack and held it to his lips. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin, his hands shaking as he tried to hold the skin himself. "Slow," Gianna said, pulling it back, "or you'll be sick." The boy nodded, gasping for air. Gianna knelt beside him, checking his wrists. The cuts weren't deep, but they were infected. She'd need to clean them. "What's your name?" she asked. "Thomas." He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "What's yours?" "Gianna." Are you Comanche?" She nodded. Thomas's gaze dropped. "They told me your people would kill me if they found me out here." "Maybe they should have." His head snapped up, fear flashing across his face. Gianna almost smiled, almost. "But I'm not going to," she said. She stood and looked around. The sun was past its peak, which meant she had maybe 4 hours of daylight left, not enough time to get Thomas back to anywhere safe, and she couldn't leave him here, which meant she'd have to bring him with her. "Can you walk?" she asked. Thomas struggled to his feet, wincing as his weight settled on his battered soles. "I think so." "Then follow me and stay quiet." She started walking, and after a moment's hesitation, Thomas limped after her. They walked until the sun touched the horizon, and Ayana led him to a place she knew, a narrow ravine with a rocky overhang that provided shelter from the wind. A small stream ran along the bottom, and the walls were high enough to hide a fire if she kept it small. Thomas collapsed as soon as they stopped, his face pale and slick with sweat. Yana built a fire, then knelt beside the stream and filled her water skin. She brought it back to Thomas and made him drink again, then pulled out a strip of dried meat from her pack. "Eat," she said, handing it to him. He took it with trembling hands and bit into it, chewing slowly. After a few bites, he stopped and looked at her. "Why are you helping me?" Yana didn't answer right away. She pulled her knife and began cleaning his wounds, her movements efficient and practiced. "Because no one should die tied to a fence," she said finally. Thomas winced as she worked, but he didn't pull away. "Your uncle," Ayana said, "will he come looking for you?" Thomas shook his head. "He wanted me dead. He won't come back." "And if someone else finds you?" He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "Then I'm dead anyway." Gianna tied off the last bandage and sat back. She studied him, this boy with angry eyes and nowhere to go. "You can't stay out here alone," she said. "I know. And you can't go back to your people." "I know that too." Gianna was quiet for a moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. "Then you'll come with me." Thomas stared at her. "With you, but your people." "My people are gone," Ayana said, her voice flat. "My village was raided 2 winters ago. Everyone I knew is dead or scattered. I'm alone." The words hung in the air between them. Thomas's throat worked. "So you're like me." Ayana met his gaze. "Yes." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly, and the stars began to emerge overhead, cold and distant. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice small but steady. "If you let me stay with you," he said, "I'll protect you, I swear it. I'll learn to hunt, to fight, whatever you need. I'll never leave you alone." Gianna looked at him, this skinny, battered boy who'd been left to die and was now promising to protect her. It should have been funny. But instead, something in her chest tightened. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Yes, I do. You saved my life." "That doesn't mean." "Please," his voice cracked. "Let me stay. I have nowhere else to go." Yana stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "All right, you can stay." Thomas's shoulders sagged with relief, and tears spilled down his cheeks, silent, exhausted tears. Gianna turned away and stared into the fire, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake, or if she'd finally found something worth protecting. Thomas was worse than useless for the first week. He couldn't track, couldn't move quietly, couldn't tell the difference between an animal trail and a game path. His hands were soft, his feet blistered, and he tired so quickly that Ayana had to slow her pace to half what she was used to. But he tried. Every morning he woke before dawn and watched her prepare for the hunt. He asked questions, too many questions, about the plants she gathered, the animals she tracked, the way she read the land. And slowly, painfully, he began to learn. "Why do you check the wind before you move?" he asked one morning as they crouched in the tall grass, watching a small herd of pronghorn. "Because animals smell better than they see," Ayana said quietly. "If the wind carries your scent to them, they'll run before you get close." Thomas nodded, filing the information away. Gianna nocked an arrow and drew the bow, her movements smooth and practiced. The arrow flew, and one of the pronghorn dropped. The others scattered. Thomas let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was incredible. Gianna didn't respond. She was already moving toward the fallen animal, her knife drawn. Thomas followed, watching as she worked. She bled the animal, gutted it efficiently, and began the process of butchering. Her hands were steady, precise, and there was no hesitation in her movements. "Can you teach me how to do that?" Thomas asked. Gianna glanced at him. "You want to learn?" "I want to be useful." She studied him for a moment, then handed him the knife. "Start with the hide, cut along the belly, careful not to puncture the organs." Thomas took the knife, his hands shaking slightly. He made the first cut, and it was clumsy, uneven, but he kept going. Gianna watched, correcting him when he went wrong, guiding his hands when he hesitated. By the time they were done, Thomas's hands were covered in blood, and the hide was ruined in 3 places. But he'd done it. "Better," Gianna said. Thomas looked up at her, surprised. "Really?" "No, but better than nothing." Despite himself, Thomas smiled. 2 weeks in, they encountered other people. It was a wagon train, settlers heading west, their canvas-covered wagons creaking along a rutted trail. Gianna spotted them from a ridge and immediately pulled Thomas back into the cove. Of the rocks. "We need to go around," she said. "Why, they're just travelers." Gianna looked at him, her expression hard. "To them, I'm a savage, and you're with me, that makes you one too." Thomas frowned, but... "No," Gianna's voice was sharp. "We stay hidden, we don't take risks." They waited until the wagon train passed, then circled wide around it, adding an extra day to their journey. That night, as they sat by the fire, Thomas finally asked the question that had been building inside him. "What happened to your village?" Gianna didn't look at him. She stared into the flames, her face unreadable. "Soldiers," she said finally. "They came at dawn, said we'd been raiding settlements, said we'd stolen horses and killed settlers." "Had you?" Gianna's jaw tightened. Some had, others hadn't. The soldiers didn't care. They burned the lodges, killed the men, took the women and children. Thomas's throat tightened. "And you?" "I was out hunting. When I came back, there was nothing left but smoke." The silence that followed was heavy. "I'm sorry," Thomas said quietly. Gianna finally looked at him. "Your people did it, your soldiers." "I know, but I'm still sorry." She held his gaze for a long moment, searching for something, insincerity, maybe, or pity, but all she saw was guilt. "It wasn't your fault," she said. "It feels like it was." Gianna turned back to the fire. "Then carry that feeling, use it, don't let it make you weak." Thomas nodded slowly. A month in, everything changed. They were camped near a spring when the riders appeared, 3 men on horseback, rough-looking, armed with rifles and revolvers. They saw Gianna first, and their faces lit up with a kind of hunger that made Thomas's skin crawl. "Well, well," one of them said, dismounting. "What do we have here? A little Indian squaw all alone." Gianna stood slowly, her hand moving toward her knife. The man laughed. "Easy now, we're not looking for trouble, just company." "Leave," Gianna said, her voice low. The man's smile widened. "That's not very friendly." Thomas stepped forward, his heart hammering. She said leave. The 3 men looked at him, surprised. Then they laughed. "And who are you, her pet white boys?" Thomas's hands clenched into fists. "I'm telling you to leave, now." The lead man's expression darkened. "You got a mouth on you, boy. Maybe we should teach you some manners." He reached for Thomas, and Thomas swung. His fist connected with the man's jaw, and the man stumbled back, shocked. Then his face twisted with rage. "You little..." Gianna moved. Her knife was out, and before the man could draw his gun, she had the blade pressed against his throat. "Touch him," she said quietly, "and you die." The other 2 men reached for their weapons, but Gianna pressed the knife harder, and a thin line of blood appeared. "Tell them to back off," Gianna said. The lead man swallowed, his eyes wide. Back off, do it. The other men hesitated, then slowly raised their hands. Good, Gianna said. Now mount up, ride out, and if I see you again, I won't give you a warning. The lead man nodded quickly. Gianna pulled the knife back, and he scrambled onto his horse. The three of them rode off, disappearing into the distance. Gianna turned to Thomas. He was shaking, his fists still clenched, his face pale. That was stupid, she said. I know. You could have gotten us both killed. I know. Then why did you do it? Thomas looked at her, and his voice was steady despite the tremor in his hands. Because I made a promise, I said I'd protect you. Gianna stared at him, something shifting in her chest. You're just a boy. I don't care. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. You're brave, she said, stupid, but brave. Thomas let out a shaky breath. Thank you. Gianna nodded. Next time, let me handle it. I will. But they both knew he wouldn't. That night, as Thomas slept, Gianna sat by the fire and watched him. He was still so young, still so fragile, but there was something in him that reminded her of her younger brother, the one who died in the raid, the same stubbornness, the same fierce loyalty. She saved Thomas because it was the right thing to do. But now, looking at him, she realized something. He'd saved her too. Not from the men, from the loneliness that had been eating her alive since her village burned. Gianna reached over and pulled the blanket higher around Thomas's shoulders. Sleep well, little brother, she whispered. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel alone. The bounty hunters found them 3 months later. Gianna had been careful. She kept them moving, avoided settlements, stayed away from the main trails. But the West was shrinking. There were fewer places to hide, fewer places where a Comanche woman and a white boy could go unnoticed. They were camped in a cottonwood grove near a creek when the shots rang out. The first bullet tore through the canvas of their makeshift shelter. The second kicked up dirt near the fire. Gianna grabbed Thomas and pulled him behind a fallen log as more shots followed, splintering the wood above their heads. Stay down, Gianna hissed. She crawled to the edge of the log and peered out. 4 men spread out in a loose arc, rifles raised, professional, organized, not like the drifters they'd encountered before. Bounty hunters. Gianna's stomach sank. We know you're in there, one of the men called out. Come out with your hands up, and we'll make this easy. Thomas looked at Gianna, his eyes wide. What do we do? Gianna's mind raced. They were pinned down, outnumbered, and her bow was useless at this range against rifles. We run, she said. Where's? The creek, follow it north. Don't stop no matter what. Thomas's face went pale. What about you? I'll buy you time. No, Thomas grabbed her arm. I'm not leaving you. You have to. No, his voice cracked. You said we stay together, you promised. Gianna stared at him, and in that moment, she saw everything he'd become over the past 3 months. He wasn't the terrified boy tied to a fence anymore. He was something else, something fierce. All right, she said, together. She pulled her knife, and Thomas grabbed a fallen branch, not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. On my signal, Gianna said, we run for the trees on the far side of the creek. Don't look back. Thomas nodded. Gianna took a deep breath, then threw a rock in the opposite direction. It clattered against stone, and 2 of the bounty hunters turned toward the sound. Now! They burst from cover, running low and fast. Shots erupted behind them, bullets whipping through the air. Gianna felt one pass so close to her head she heard the buzz of it. They hit the creek at full speed, splashing through the shallow water. Thomas slipped on a wet stone and went down, and Gianna grabbed him, hauling him upright. Keep moving. They crashed into the tree line on the far side, and the shooting stopped. The bounty hunters were following on foot now, moving through the creek, their voices calling out to each other. Jana and Thomas ran deeper into the woods, branches whipping at their faces, roots catching their feet. Jana's lungs burned, and beside her, Thomas was gasping, his face red with effort. They couldn't keep this pace, not for long. Jana spotted a rocky outcrop ahead, half hidden by brush. She pulled Thomas toward it, and they squeezed into a narrow crevice between two boulders. They pressed themselves flat, trying to control their breathing, trying to stay silent. Footsteps approached. Jana's hand tightened on her knife. Beside her, Thomas held the branch like a club, his knuckles white. The footsteps stopped. "They're close," a voice said. "Spread out. Check every tree, every rock." Jana closed her eyes, her heart pounding so loud she was sure they'd hear it. A shadow fell across the entrance to their hiding place. One of the bounty hunters stood there, his rifle raised, scanning the brush. He was less than 10 feet away. Jana held her breath. The man took a step closer. And then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, a sound, a branch snapping, loud and sharp. The man's head whipped around, over there. He ran toward the sound, and the others followed. Jana waited until the footsteps faded, then let out a slow breath. "What was that?" Thomas whispered. "I don't know, but we need to move, now." They slipped out of the crevice and moved in the opposite direction, quiet and fast. They traveled for another hour, putting as much distance between themselves and the bounty hunters as possible. Finally, as the sun began to set, Jana stopped. "We'll rest here," she said. "No fire, no sound." Thomas nodded, too exhausted to argue. They found shelter beneath an overhang, and Thomas collapsed, his chest heaving. Jana sat beside him, her knife still in her hand, her eyes scanning the darkness. "Why are they hunting you?" Thomas asked after a moment. Jana was quiet, then she spoke, her voice low. "There's a bounty on Comanche. $10 for everyone brought in, alive or dead, more if they're young, strong." Thomas's face twisted with horror. That's barbaric. "That's the world we live in." Thomas looked at her, and something hardened in his expression. "Then we need to leave, go somewhere they can't find us." "There's nowhere like that, not anymore." "Then we fight." Jana looked at him, surprised. "Fight? There are 4 of them, 2 of us, and one of us is." "A boy, I know." Thomas's jaw was set. "But I'm not going to let them take you, I made a promise." Jana stared at him, and something inside her cracked open. "You're an idiot," she said softly. "I know." She almost smiled, almost. "Get some rest," she said. "We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Thomas lay down, and within minutes he was asleep. Jana stayed awake, her knife across her knees, listening to the sounds of the night. And she thought about the boy who'd promised to protect her. Who stood beside her when he should have run. Who'd become something she never expected. Family. They didn't run the next morning. Jana had spent the night thinking, and by the time dawn broke, she'd made a decision. They couldn't keep running forever. Eventually, the bounty hunters would catch up, or someone else would. So instead, they'd turn the tables. "We're going to track them," Jana said as Thomas woke. Thomas blinked, confused. "Track who?" "The bounty hunters. They're looking for us. We'll find them first." "That's insane." "It's necessary. If we know where they are, we can avoid them, or deal with them on our terms." Thomas sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "And how do we deal with 4 armed men?" "Carefully." They spent the day moving through the woods, following the signs the bounty hunters had left behind. Boot prints in the soft earth, broken branches, the faint smell of tobacco smoke. By mid-afternoon, they found the hunters' camp. It was set up in a clearing near the creek, with 4 bedrolls spread around a fire. The men were there, 3 sitting, 1 standing, all of them armed. Jana and Thomas watched from the cover of the trees, barely breathing. They're tired, Ayana whispered. Frustrated, they've been searching all day. Good, Thomas said. One of the men stood and stretched. This is a waste of time. That squaw's long gone by now. Probably, another said, but Jenkins said $10 for her. That's good money. If we can find her. We will, she's got the boy with her. That'll slow her down. Thomas's jaw clenched, but Ayana placed a hand on his arm, keeping him still. They watched for another hour as the sun set and the bounty hunters settled in for the night. One by one, they lay down, leaving a single man on watch. What now? Thomas whispered. Now we wait. When the guard changes, we move. Move where? They're horses. If we take them, they can't follow us. Thomas nodded slowly. All right. They waited until midnight when the guard changed. The new man was older, slower, and within an hour he was nodding off. Yana moved first, slipping through the darkness like a shadow. Thomas followed, his heart pounding, trying to place his feet exactly where she placed hers. They reached the horses, 4 of them, tied to a line between 2 trees. Yana began untying the knots, her fingers working quickly and silently. Thomas kept watch, his eyes on the sleeping men. 3 horses free, 4. And then one of the horses snorted. The guard's head snapped up. Hey, who's there? Yana grabbed the lead rope and pulled, and the horses started moving. Thomas ran alongside her, his legs pumping as the bounty hunters shouted behind them. They're stealing the horses. Shoot them. Gunshots cracked through the night, but Ayana and Thomas were already gone, disappearing into the darkness with the horses in tow. They ran for a mile before slowing, their chests heaving. The horses followed, skittish but obedient. Thomas let out a breathless laugh. We did it. Yana allowed herself a small smile. We did. They released the horses a few miles away, scattering them so the bounty hunters would have to spend days rounding them up. Then they turned north, putting as much distance between themselves and the hunters as possible. By the time they stopped to rest, the sun was rising. Thomas collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. How far do you think we've gone? Far enough for now. Yana sat beside him, and for the first time in days, she let herself relax. Thomas looked at her, his face serious. Thank you for not leaving me behind. I told you, we stay together. I know, but you could have run faster without me. You could have been safe. Yana turned to him. Safe and alone is no way to live. Thomas smiled faintly. I guess not. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun climb higher. Yana, Thomas said finally. Yes. When I was tied to that fence, I thought I was going to die, and I was angry, not scared, just angry, at my uncle, at the world, at everything. Yana listened. But then you came, Thomas continued, and you saved me, and ever since I've been trying to figure out why. I told you, no one should die tied to a fence. I know, but I think there's more to it than that. Yana looked at him. I think you saved me because you didn't want to be alone anymore, Thomas said quietly, and I don't blame you because I didn't want to be alone either. Iana's throat tightened. You remind me of my brother, she said finally. He was brave, stubborn, loyal. He died in the raid. Thomas nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Don't be, he would have liked you. Thomas smiled. I think I would have liked him too. Yana reached over and placed a hand on his shoulder. You're my family now, she said, the only family I have left. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. You're mine too. As the sun rose higher, 2 people who'd been left for dead, who'd found each other in the wasteland and decided to keep living. Together. The bounty hunters never found them. Without their horses, the men were forced to walk back to the nearest settlement, and by the time they returned with fresh mounts, Ayana and Thomas were long gone, their trail cold and scattered by wind and rain. But Ayana knew they couldn't run forever. So she made another decision. We're going north, she told Thomas one morning, into the mountains. Why? Because there are places up there where white men don't go, places where we can disappear. Thomas looked toward the distant peaks, their tops white with snow even in summer. It'll be hard, he said. Yes, but we'll be safe. Safer. Thomas nodded, then let's go. The journey took 2 months. They traveled through high passes and narrow valleys, through forests so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground. They hunted elk and fished in icy streams, and at night they built fires and told stories. Thomas learned to track, to hunt, to move through the wilderness like he'd been born to it. His hands grew calloused, his body lean and strong. He wasn't a boy anymore. And Hyana learned something too. She learned that family wasn't just blood. It was choice. It was standing beside someone even when it would be easier to walk away. It was saving a boy tied to a fence and letting him save you back. They found their place in a hidden valley, sheltered on all sides by mountains, with a clear stream running through the center and game trails crisscrossing the meadow. Yana stood on a ridge, looking down at it, and for the first time in years, she felt something close to hope. This is it, she said. Thomas stood beside her, his eyes wide. It's perfect. It'll be hard work. We'll need shelter before winter. We'll need to hunt and store food. I know, Thomas looked at her, his expression serious, but we'll do it together. Iana smiled, together. They built a lodge in the traditional way, using branches and hides and stone. Thomas worked until his hands bled, and Iana taught him every skill she knew: how to cure meat, how to read the weather, how to survive. By the time the first snow fell, they were ready. They sat inside the lodge that night, the fire crackling between them, warm and safe. Do you ever miss them? Thomas asked. Your people. Gianna was quiet for a moment. Every day, but I can't bring them back. All I can do is honor them by living. Thomas nodded. I think they'd be proud of you. I hope so. Thomas stared into the fire. My uncle said I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything. Your uncle was wrong. I know that now, because of you. Gianna reached over and ruffled his hair, the way she used to do with her brother. You're not worthless, Thomas. You're strong, you're loyal, and you're the reason I'm still alive. Thomas's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. And you're the reason I am. Years passed. The valley remained hidden, and no one came looking for them. Gianna and Thomas lived, as they always had, hunting, gathering, surviving, but it was more than survival now. It was a life. Thomas grew taller, broader, his boyish features hardening into those of a man. He became a skilled hunter, a fierce protector, and Ayana's most trusted companion. And Ayana, who had once been the last survivor of her village, found something she thought she'd lost forever. A home. One spring morning, when Thomas was 17, he came back from a hunt with a strange look on his face. There are people in the valley below, he said. A family, settlers. Their wagon broke down. Gianna's hand moved to her knife. Are they armed? They have a rifle, but they don't look dangerous. There's a man, a woman, and 2 children. The youngest can't be more than 5. Gianna frowned. What do you want to do? Thomas looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same defiance he'd had when she'd found him tied to that fence. I want to help them. Gianna studied him. They're white. They might not trust us. Maybe, but they need help, just like I did. Gianna was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. All right, we'll help them. They approached the family carefully, hands open, weapons lowered. The man raised his rifle, but Ayana spoke first. We're not here to hurt you, she said in English. We saw your wagon, you need help. The man stared at her, then at Thomas, his expression wary. But the woman stepped forward, her face exhausted and desperate. Please, she said, our wheel is broken. We've been stranded for 2 days. Our water is almost gone. Yana nodded. We can fix it, and we have food. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. They worked through the day, Thomas and the settler man repairing the wheel while Yana shared food and water with the family. The children stared at her with wide eyes, but they weren't afraid. By evening, the wagon was fixed. The settler man extended his hand to Thomas. Thank you, we'd have died out here without you. Thomas shook it, just passing on a kindness. The man frowned, confused, but Ayana smiled. As the family rode away, Thomas stood beside Ayana, watching them disappear into the distance. Do you think they'll be all right? He asked. I think so, they have each other. Thomas nodded, like we do. Like we do. They turned and walked back toward the valley, toward the home they'd built, toward the life they'd chosen. And as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Yana thought about the boy she'd found tied to a fence. The boy who'd vowed to protect her forever. And she realized something. He'd kept his promise, just as she'd kept hers. Years later, when travelers passed through the mountains, they would sometimes tell stories about the valley hidden in the peaks, about the Comanche woman and the white man who lived there, who helped lost travelers and asked for nothing in return. Some said they were ghosts. Others said they were angels. But those who met them knew the truth. They were family, bound not by blood, but by something stronger. By choice, by loyalty, by love. And in a world that had tried to destroy them both, they had built something beautiful. Together.